30 funniest 1970s things that would be illegal today. Do you recall the sensation of sitting in the back of a pickup truck without a seatbelt or witnessing a teacher discipline a student with a wooden paddle? The 70s was the golden era of careless freedom, a world where danger was entirely normal. But why have the pleasures that once made us laugh now been banished from modern society? We will discover the answer by unlocking these forbidden memories right now. Clackers. In the 1970s, clackers were the pinnacle of cool on the playground, a toy everyone desired to own. They were two hard plastic balls suspended on a thin string with a small ring for you to grip. You held the ring, shaking it back and forth until the two balls continuously collided above and below your hand, creating a clack, clack, clack sound like a chaotic machine with a hypnotic rhythm. It was an addictive toy, and the satisfaction that came from mastering that rhythmic chaos was unparalleled. Everyone wanted to prove they could maintain the fastest and strongest rhythm. However, this toy had a fatal flaw. The material clackers were made from acrylic, a plastic that was too brittle. When you performed fast maneuvers, the friction and pressure created heat, stretching the plastic to its limit. Eventually, the ball would shatter, firing sharp plastic fragments everywhere like shrapnel. Children ended up with bruises, deep cuts, and in rare cases, glass-sharp pieces of plastic shot into their eyes. Parents panicked, teachers banned them from school, and eventually the government intervened, pulling clackers off toy shelves. The danger was part of the thrill, and they were banned for being too violent. The game show host kiss. In the 1970s, game shows were filled with winks, nudges, and kisses, often from the host to any female contestant. The king of this practice was Richard Dawson on Family Feud. He kissed every woman who stepped up to the podium, regardless of whether they were married or single, old or young. That was his signature gesture, lip to lip or cheek to cheek. It was a personal mark he had turned into part of the show. The studio audience cheered, contestants blushed, and no one called it strange behavior. It was considered charming, even polite, part of the television glamour. It's hard to believe looking back, but that was a time before workplace boundaries had a clear name, before any discussion about consent was made on air. The host was the celebrity, and contestants were expected to comply with whatever the show format entailed. But as time passed, people started speaking up. Television networks became cautious. This act was later deemed lacking in workplace boundaries. The idea of a host kissing random people would now cause outrage, not applause. For a long time, it was primetime gold, a strange mix of funny and creepy in hindsight. Riding in the back of the pickup truck, before car seats, before safety laws, and before anyone thought about windburn or flying gravel, there was the truck bed. In the 1970s, this was every kid's favorite spot, an uncontrolled zone. There were no seatbelts, no helmets, just the bare steel floor and the open road ahead. You piled in with your cousins, sat on tires or toolboxes, and held on for dear life. The feeling was like a roller coaster, but completely free. You could wave at the cars behind you, yell into the wind, or lie down and watch the clouds drift by. It was a feeling of absolute freedom, but freedom came at a cost. Accidents were frequent. Failing to hold on tightly meant being thrown out during sharp turns or sudden braking. Hospitals and lawmakers started to notice. By the 1990s, most states had banned children from riding in the truck bed. Today, you would be pulled over immediately. Looking back, it's hard to believe this was once allowed, but it was part of the recklessness of the time. Backward-facing station wagon seats. If the truck bed was the country kid's favorite place, the backward-facing station wagon seats were the dream seat on the highway. You hadn't truly lived until you rode in the back seat of the wagon, facing the oncoming traffic. It was like being on a slow-moving fairground ride. There were no seat belts, just a metal handle for you to grab when the car turned too fast. You spent the whole trip waving at drivers or making faces at strangers, watching headlights rush toward you like a scene from a spy movie chase. Parents liked it too, because you were out of sight and not bothering them. No one worried about crash safety or whiplash. It was just how cars were built. Safety regulations were not the same as today. Back then, fun was more important than physics. But as car accidents increased and injury data poured in, the change was inevitable. Backward-facing seats disappeared as car safety regulations tightened. Now there are booster seats, airbags, and child locks. Do you remember the neighbor friend you used to hang out with? Tell me your special stories about them. Let's preserve this legacy of community connection together. Smoking on airplanes. Have you ever tried breathing in an airborne ashtray at 30,000 feet? That was the air travel experience in the 1970s. No matter how glamorous the idea of flying seemed, the air in the cabin was literally thick with smoke. You couldn't escape it. Rows had ashtrays in every armrest. The smoking section was just a joke because the whole plane reeked of cigarettes. In fact, flight attendants even offered free cigarettes on some flights. They called it service. No one seemed to care that there were infants on the plane or asthmatics trying to survive. It was just part of the experience. But lawsuits and scientific evidence began to emerge. By the mid-1980s, airlines started dividing smoking areas. Eventually, a complete smoking ban was implemented for domestic flights, followed by international ones. Today, the idea of someone lighting up next to your seat is enough to cause panic. It was a health violation, a fire hazard, and simply disrespectful to your neighbor. Cigarette and alcohol vending machines. Imagine walking into a grocery store, dropping coins into a machine, and pulling out a pack of cigarettes or a cold can of beer. Vending machines selling cigarettes and alcohol were everywhere in the 1970s. No ID check, no age limit, just coins and absolute convenience. Children could, and actually did, buy packs of cigarettes right next to the Snickers bar. No one questioned it. It was just a normal part of the social landscape. Bars had them. Gas stations had them. Even some workplaces had them in the break room. Need a smoke break? Head to the vending machine. No manager needed. That was a freedom people took for granted. However, the consequences began to pile up. Teenage smoking rates skyrocketed. It was the absolute symbol of adult convenience and a complete failure of supervision. Eventually, lawmakers intervened. Now, cigarette machines still exist in some places, but only in tightly controlled areas with ID scanners. Babysitting with full access. In the 1970s, a babysitter's starter pack looked very different. You had a bottle of soda, a six-pack of beer in the fridge, and a cigarette in your hand, and surprisingly, all of it was for the sitter, not the parents. Teenagers were often tasked with watching children with zero supervision and full access to everything in the kitchen or liquor cabinet. You could find 15-year-olds lighting up after they had put the toddler to bed. Some even invited friends over on the fly. It sounds like a script for a terrible comedy movie, but that was the reality. Parents trusted young teenagers without background checks, no cell phones for contact, and no clear emergency numbers. They just gave a quick wave and called out, "Call us if the house is on fire." Over time, people became more cautious. Safety laws tightened. Drinking while babysitting became illegal in many places, and smoking around children was also banned. Babysitters stopped being party organizers and became real caregivers. Amphetamine diet pills. In the 1970s, society was always looking for a quick fix for every problem, especially weight loss. If you wanted instant results, there were plenty of pills available for you. These diet products were heavily advertised, targeting housewives, working women, and even teenagers, promising to control appetite, boost energy, and achieve rapid weight loss. However, what these ads didn't mention was the main ingredient inside: amphetamine, essentially legal speed. You would take a pill in the morning and feel unstoppable, not hungry, not tired, maybe a little jittery, but that was understood to be the drug working. Doctors even prescribed them, and ads made it sound completely normal, just a part of self-care. Magazines were filled with testimonials promising you would lose dozens of pounds in just a week without mentioning the risk of heart problems or addiction potential. The side effects were scary: anxiety, mood swings, insomnia, and many other serious issues. But the obsession with thinness was stronger than the warnings. By the late 1970s and early 1980s, the truth was exposed. Amphetamines were reclassified and diet pills were reformed. But for a decade, this was the quick fix, a dangerous symbol of the era's relentless pursuit of instant results: lead-based paint. This was an invisible hazard hidden behind vibrant and friendly colors. Lead-based paint was widely used because it was bright, cheap, and easy to apply. It made reds redder, yellows pop, and blues bright like the summer sky. No one questioned what was inside it, at least not initially. So everything was painted with lead: swings, wooden toy trains, even lunchboxes. And yes, toddlers chewed on them because that's what young children do. Unfortunately, lead wasn't just on the surface. It flaked off, chipped, and entered the mouth, the bloodstream, and the developing brain. Users began showing signs of lead poisoning, developmental delays, behavioral problems, and lifelong cognitive damage. Yet for years, no one connected the dots, or they did but acted slowly. It wasn't until 1978 that the U.S. government finally banned lead-based paint in homes and children's products. But by then, the damage was done. Generations were exposed to a neurotoxin because no one bothered to ask if paint should be edible. Today, lead paint is a public health crisis, but it was once a bit of sparkle on a toy truck, or a silent poison hidden away. Enjoying this trip down memory lane? Don't forget to hit the like button. It's the best way to help our channel grow. Corporal punishment in schools. Classrooms in the 1970s came with rulers, blackboards, and something else: the paddle. Large, flat wooden paddles, often with holes drilled to create aerodynamics, hung behind the teacher's desk as a warning sign. If you misbehaved, you would be told to bend over and take your punishment. Corporal punishment was not a threat. It was standard policy. A swat on the rear was considered discipline, not abuse. Some schools even had public paddling sessions. Parents supported it. Spare the rod, spoil the child was the basic lesson of parenting. Children lived in fear of that paddle. But over time, medical experts and child psychologists started speaking up. It turned out that hitting children with a wooden board didn't actually foster a healthy learning environment. Children affected in class often had symptoms of trauma, fear of going to school, negatively affecting their psychology. By the late 1980s, most states had banned corporal punishment in public schools. They realized the way to raise good children was not through the rod, but through educational methods that helped them better understand the problem. Oldsmobile. Oldsmobile was the brand your uncle trusted, representing reliability, stability, and American pride. In the 70s, it was one of General Motors' most successful lines. The Cutlass was everywhere, a symbol of middle-class confidence. You could see it in parking lots, driveways, and high school graduation gifts. However, times began to change. Japanese automakers brought new efficiency, and the luxury car market shifted to Europe. Oldsmobile struggled to redefine itself. Should it be sporty, classic, or aimed at retirees? The answer never came. Designs became dated. Performance lagged. The name Oldsmobile began to sound like a joke no one wanted to explain. By the 1990s, Oldsmobile felt out of place, like an obsolete brand. Although General Motors tried to refresh it, update it, and give it a new face, it was too late. Sales declined, dealerships lost faith. Oldsmobile ceased production in 2004, ending not with a crash, but with a sigh, a slow fade. It had failed to hold its position in the new competition. Sugary cereal ads. Saturday morning was sacred hour, a non-negotiable block of time. You woke up, turned on the TV, and they were there. Bright, noisy cartoon mascots advertising mountains of sugar with big eyes and quirky voices. Tony the Tiger said it was great. Toucan Sam pleaded for you to follow his nose. Behind the cartoon animals were advertisers in disguise. The 1970s saw the golden age of children's programming and an explosion of cereal ads during those hours. It was the sharpest targeted marketing. Kids glued to cartoons were bombarded by jingles, mascots, and colorful boxes offering a prize inside and 40 grams of sugar per bowl. Parents thought it was harmless, but nutritionists sounded the alarm. It turned out that having cartoon animals convince 5-year-olds to eat dessert for breakfast every day probably wasn't the healthiest plan. Lawmakers and health organizations started intervening. Today, there are strict rules about advertising these types of products, and many networks voluntarily restrict high-sugar cereal advertising during children's programming blocks. The mascots still exist, but they have been defanged, less aggressive, focusing more on whole grains and added vitamins. Asbestos. You probably never saw it, and that's the scariest thing. Asbestos was everywhere in the 1970s. It was tucked into ceiling tiles, sprayed onto school walls, and mixed into the spongy pink insulation stuffed behind drywall. It was advertised as a miracle material, fireproof, durable, cheap. What no one talked about, at least not publicly, was that inhaling it could slowly kill you. For decades, students sat learning math while microscopic asbestos fibers floated in the air. Cleaners swept floors filled with toxic dust. Asbestos was still legal and widely used in the 1970s. Only a handful of studies were published, and whistleblowers were silenced. Eventually, lawsuits brought the truth to light. The link to cancer, mesothelioma, became undeniable. Today, schools must undergo asbestos abatement. The worst part is that it was invisible. You didn't see the danger, you just breathed it in. It took decades for people to realize the invisible danger they were inhaling. Dr. Cigarette ads. What really sold a pack of cigarettes? It was a man in a white coat saying it was good for your health. In the 1970s, television was filled with cigarette ads where actual licensed doctors told you which brand was gentler on the throat or less irritating. These weren't actors pretending. These were the people who gave you shots and told you to eat more greens. And now they were endorsing cigarettes. It sounds completely insane now, but back then it was very serious. The trust was automatic. If your doctor smokes, how bad can it be? Cigarette companies capitalized on this, creating iconic ads with doctors smoking even while making house calls. But the truth was catching up. As lung cancer cases rose, this pretense collapsed. By the late 1970s, public outrage and increasing health evidence forced networks to eliminate cigarette advertising entirely. The white coats disappeared, replaced by Surgeon General warnings. And thank you for watching. To continue with more content, comment "Yes" to let us know you're still following. Flight attendants based on looks. Flying in the 1970s was considered glamorous, but that glamour came at a steep price, often served by women bringing drinks. They were called stewardesses, never flight attendants. They were hired primarily for their looks, not their skills. There were height requirements, weight checks, makeup checks, and tight uniforms, like miniskirts, go-go boots. These women were often required to be single and could be fired if they married or became pregnant. Their entire job depended on maintaining a youthful appearance and being constantly available. By the late 1970s, lawsuits started piling up. Feminist groups pushed for change. Gradually, the rules blurred, uniforms changed, and job titles changed. Stewardesses became flight attendants, and the sky was no longer a fashion runway. Times Square squalor. There was a time when Times Square was not for families, not for Disney, and not for tourists taking selfies. In the 1970s, Times Square was a jungle of sin lit by neon. It was filled with strip clubs and, most famously, peep shows. You paid a few coins, stepped into a small booth, and watched. It was dark, noisy, dirty, and completely normal. Times Square was advertised as rough, authentic New York. But hidden beneath the neon lights, crime was rampant and exploitation flourished. Eventually, the city intervened with major redevelopment efforts in the 1990s. Peep shows disappeared, replaced by chain stores and tourist spots. Today, Times Square is cleaned up, bright, and family-friendly. Some New Yorkers still remember when it was just flashing signs and whispers behind the glass. Blow-up furniture. In the 1970s, your living room might have looked like a bouncy castle. Inflatable furniture was the craze. Blow-up chairs, inflatable sofas, even blow-up stools. They were bright neon and made of shiny PVC plastic. You bought them at department stores and inflated them by mouth or a small pump. They were light, cheap, and supposedly cool. If you were a teenager or college student, having an inflatable chair meant you were trendy. The problem was, they were barely practical furniture. Sit too fast and it would pop. Drag it across the floor and it might rip. Leave it in the sun and it melted into a pile of smelly chemicals. Worse yet, PVC off-gassing was not good for health. Inhaling plastic fumes in a sealed room for hours was not ideal. By the 1980s, health concerns and practicality killed the trend. Scratch and sniff stickers. Scratch and sniff stickers made notebooks smell like fruit salad or something pretending to be grape, banana, pizza, or popcorn. If it existed, there was probably a sticker that created its chemical approximation of the scent. These little scented rewards were playground currency. You earned them from teachers, traded them with friends, and collected them in sticker books. You flipped through your favorites like a connoisseur. Some smelled so strong they burned your eyes. Others lost their scent after a few scratches but were still kept, revered as faded trophies. You knew the popular smells: root beer, bubble gum, and anything with glitter. Scratching a sticker in class was a quiet act of rebellion. You weren't supposed to, but you did, and then you passed the notebook around for others to smell. They were low-tech fun with high nostalgia value. Ultra-realistic plastic rifles. The 1970s was the Wild West of toy advertising, and nothing showed that better than kids on TV blasting away with ultra-realistic plastic rifles. These weren't Nerf guns or neon water pistols. These were detailed replicas down to the wood grain and the sound of the bolt action. Some even had fake shell casings that ejected. Kids wore camouflage, took aim, and ran across fields like little soldiers. Parents watched the ads and smiled, thinking it was just play. However, no one thought about the real consequences until they had to. Stories began to spread about police mistaking toy guns for real ones, resulting in children being injured or worse. Schools and cities started banning them. By the 1990s, new rules required toy guns to have bright orange tips. Now, most toy weapons are so stylized that they are barely recognizable. High karate aftershave. High karate aftershave was a joke and a phenomenon at the same time. It came in a cheap bottle with a hilarious commercial so exaggerated that it turned masculinity into a parody of itself. The ad claimed that spraying this on would make women attack you, literally. The commercials were absurd, over the top, and completely unforgettable. But behind the humor was a surprisingly pleasant scent. High karate became the choice for teenage boys trying to smell grown-up and adult men trying to stay playful. It was the kind of aftershave you found in your dad's drawer. But the joke faded. The trends changed. The 1980s wanted power and polish, not the hype and chaos of high karate. High karate was quietly discontinued. Soon after, it was a punchline for some and a scent memory for others. Mixtapes. Mixtapes were handwritten love letters wrapped in a cassette case. It was a serious ritual. You waited hours by the radio just to press the record button at the perfect moment, trying to catch your favorite song without the DJ talking over it. You had to rewind, play back, and carefully arrange the perfect order so that each track flowed into the next. Some were made for crushes, some for best friends, and some just because you wanted to share music. You chose the songs that spoke what you couldn't say. Then you labeled the cassette in your best handwriting, perhaps decorated the case, and handed it over like a treasure. A great mixtape took hours, sometimes days, to perfect. When someone gave you one, you listened to it until the tape wore thin. Mixtapes were not just music, they were memories, emotions, time capsules wrapped in magnetic ribbon. Show and tell personal film/audio projector. Show and tell looked like technology from another planet, and to a kid in the 1970s, it basically was. It was a boxed device with the soul of a film projector and the heart of a storybook. It allowed you to do something incredible. Watch a film while listening to a record right in your own living room. You didn't need a teacher or a classroom, you just needed one of those magical little cartridges. It came alive with a gentle whir, the narrator's voice crackling through the speaker as the images scrolled across the small screen. It gave a feeling of the future. It was both visual and immersive, mesmerizing. Show and tell turned tedious afternoons into cinematic adventures. Although it was clunky and rudimentary, back then it was everything. A personal theater powered by your imagination. Beaded door curtains. Step through one and you were instantly transported to another room, another vibe, another world. Beaded door curtains were not just home decor, they were portals. 1 second you were in the hallway, the next you were in your older sister's room where incense was burning. The gentle clacking of the beads colliding became a soundtrack of its own, and you could never sneak through them no matter how hard you tried. They were the snitches of the 1970s. Every chime was a betrayal, but they were also beautiful, cheap, colorful, exotic in an adult way. Bought at small shops, flea markets, beaded curtains promised something magical, something grown up. Although they were useless for truly dividing rooms or providing privacy, who cared? Native American imagery, racist use mascots. Long before rebranding and social media apologies, there were logos on cereal boxes, baseball jerseys, and school gym walls featuring cartoon images of Native Americans. Teams like the Cleveland Indians and Washington Redskins used these images as mascots. Children wore costumes, fans performed fake war cries. But it wasn't a celebration, it was simplification, stereotyping. It was a constant visual reminder of how indigenous identities had been turned into costumes. Native groups protested, but they were often ignored, with people saying it was tradition. Gradually, the pressure increased. Universities dropped their mascots, then professional teams. You would never see them appear again because the use of this imagery is considered disrespectful. TWA, Trans World Airlines. There was a time when TWA was a symbol of elegance. Stepping onto a Trans World Airlines flight was like walking into a luxury hotel in the sky. Wide seats, crisp service, and iconic logo. But by the 1970s, deregulation hit hard. New competitors swooped in, offering faster routes and cheaper tickets. Fuel prices soared. Labor disputes dragged on. TWA struggled to maintain its reputation and felt obsolete and expensive. It expanded too quickly, bought too many jets, and couldn't keep up with the ruthless economics of modern air travel. Bankruptcy became familiar. American Airlines absorbed what was left in the early 2000s. TWA failed not with a crash, but with a sigh, a slow fade. Burger Chef. Burger Chef once had more locations than McDonald's. That's the part everyone forgets. Burger Chef pioneered the fun meal, the direct predecessor of the Happy Meal. They gave kids toys, games, and branded packaging years before anyone else. The burgers were good, the prices affordable, and families loved it. But then came lawsuits, missteps, and the slow loss of bad business decisions. Hardee's bought them, closed the locations, and erased the name almost overnight. Some buildings stood for years, faded signs beneath cracked asphalt. For a brand that once brought so much joy, its disappearance felt like a tragedy no one saw coming. Vivitar cameras. In the 1970s, Vivitar cameras were everywhere. They weren't the prettiest kind, but they worked. They were affordable, durable, and proudly American. Vivitar was the ticket to creativity for amateur photographers, helping them capture birthday parties, backyard barbecues, and road trips. But the world was changing. Japan was coming fast with brands like Nikon and Canon. Their lenses were sharper, designs sleeker, and technology more advanced. Vivitar couldn't keep up. It tried to shift into supplying accessories and cheap versions, but every shelf space they lost in a department store was one less memory they could help capture. Vivitar didn't just lose market share, they lost their place in the family album. By the time digital cameras arrived, it was too late. Lawn darts. If you haven't launched a heavy metal dart across the yard and narrowly missed hitting your cousin's head, you didn't grow up in the 70s. Jarts, or lawn darts, were sold as an outdoor family game. They were like horseshoes, but with actual spears. They were massive, made of thick plastic, and had a metal tip that could pierce the ground, and occasionally people. In contrast to the danger, they came in bright, family-friendly boxes, so no one thought twice about handing children a pointed missile and saying, "Go play." But by the late 1980s, emergency rooms began seeing more injuries, followed by a few fatalities. The government responded by banning the sale and import of lawn darts. Games involving the use of these darts were warned against because they were too dangerous. Slap bracelets. Slap bracelets were a toy that reached peak popularity almost overnight, especially among youth. They were simple but provided instant satisfaction. A metal strip wrapped in colorful fabric that would automatically coil tightly around your wrist with just a gentle slap. The satisfaction of slapping them onto your arm without looking was a prized playground skill. They came in neon colors, animal prints, glitter, and cartoon character prints. The louder the snap, the cooler the toy. Children traded them like currency during recess. However, popularity brought concerning problems. Schools started banning them, and parents expressed concern about the underlying metal strip. Rumors spread that if the fabric layer peeled off, the metal underneath could cause cuts on the arm. This concern, whether true or not, was enough to get them banned in schools. The concern only made them cooler for those who wanted a forbidden accessory. Teachers tried to confiscate them, but they always found their way back into backpacks and onto arms. Slap bracelets were a mix of quick fun and a slight edge of danger, just enough to feel rebellious. They were a fashion statement, a stress reliever, and a little thrill rolled into one. You'll be shocked to learn that many everyday activities were strictly forbidden in the 1970s. Just a frown, a casual song on the beach, or even keeping an ice cream cone in your pocket could land you in trouble with the police. It sounds crazy, but it's absolutely true. Get ready to unveil the secrets of seemingly harmless things that were unbelievably illegal. Walking a dog without a diaper. On a golden afternoon in the 70s, you're getting your beloved dog ready for a relaxing walk around the neighborhood. But this is the 70s, and before your pup can even set paw outside the door, you have to perform a rather special task, perhaps an unavoidable daily ritual. You have to put a diaper on it. Yes, you heard that right. In some cities in the 70s, walking a dog in public without a special dog diaper was completely illegal. At first, it might sound humorously unbelievable, even absurd. But behind that oddity lies a very practical and human reason. The main goal was to keep the streets clean, tidy, and free from any unwanted surprises from our four-legged friends. At that time, dog waste bags were not yet as common as they are today. Cities were struggling with public sanitation issues, especially in densely populated areas. Residents and authorities alike wanted a clean, open public space where children could play on sidewalks or in parks without worrying about messy piles that could cause unsanitary conditions and detract from urban aesthetics. Dog owners were responsible for ensuring their pets did not contaminate public spaces. Surely they had plenty of stories to tell about these diapers, stories that have now likely become nostalgic memories filled with laughter, using silly string. Even harmless fun can become illegal if it affects the community and living environment. Silly string, those fun, colorful spray strings, something so simple, was outlawed. They could stick to trees, cars, public signs, and other public structures, creating a messy, unsightly scene that took a lot of effort to clean up. That's why the reason behind this ban is quite simple and practical. It's the terrible mess it caused and its potential for vandalism. These spray strings, while providing instant fun, were very difficult to clean. Authorities were concerned about keeping public spaces clean and preventing property damage, as well as maintaining urban aesthetics. They saw it as not only ugly, but also very difficult to clean up. Bans on silly string were often commonly enforced at large events like parades, festivals, or Halloween, where its use could become rampant, creating colorful battlefields after each event. You can imagine a group of excited children spraying silly string everywhere after a parade, creating a colorful but also troublesome battlefield. The mess left by silly string was not only unsightly, but also very difficult to clean. Violators of this ban could be fined, reflecting the seriousness with which authorities viewed this issue. All of it was aimed at maintaining a clean and pleasant environment for all residents and visitors, a public space where everyone could enjoy without worrying about the clutter. Hanging obstructions from rearview mirrors. Do you remember those fuzzy dice, tiny perfume bottles, or other personal decorations that many people used to hang from their car's rearview mirror? If you're a fan of these car accessories, you'd have to be very careful and think twice before hanging them up, because laws were enacted to prevent hanging obstructions from rearview mirrors. This law was not to restrict personal creativity or individual style, but a crucial and practical traffic safety regulation. The main purpose was to promote safer driving, reducing the risk of accidents on the road. Dangling objects, no matter how small, can cause serious problems. They can obstruct the driver's view. Drivers need a clear and unobstructed view of the road, especially when driving in heavy traffic or bad weather. Items like perfumes, dice, or other decorations can obscure part of their vision, leading to distraction or failure to see obstacles on the road, causing unexpected, dangerous situations. Authorities realized that even the smallest objects could distract drivers or obstruct their view, leading to traffic accidents. By prohibiting these obstructions, the goal was to ensure that drivers have a clear view, thereby improving traffic safety for all road users. Enforcement of this law was quite strict, with penalties for violators to ensure everyone complied with the regulation. Removing these items helps prevent accidents and makes roads safer for everyone, from pedestrians to other vehicles. Roller skating in public restrooms. The 70s were the golden era of roller skating. From tree-lined parks and vast squares to bustling streets filled with music, wheeled skates rolled everywhere, bringing endless freedom and joy. The whole world seemed to be roller skating to vibrant disco beats, graceful moves, and exciting spins. But even during this boom in leisure, there were clear limits, boundaries that some young people had to learn to respect. One of them was you were not allowed to wear roller skates in public restrooms. Initially, it might sound unnecessary, even a bit absurd for a trending recreational activity, but it was a completely practical and necessary safety regulation. Imagine someone roller skating at high speed, engrossed in turns and spins, then suddenly turning into a public restroom. Restrooms often have slippery tiled floors or are frequently wet due to water, or sometimes have unexpected obstacles. What would happen? Certainly not a graceful dance or an artistic performance. Instead, the risk of losing control, slipping, falling, colliding with others or fixtures in the restroom was extremely high. This endangered the roller skater themselves with serious injuries and also those around them using public services. Authorities and public managers quickly recognized this potential danger. They decided that the best way to ensure safety was simply to ban roller skates in cramped, slippery, and dangerous spaces like restrooms. By strictly enforcing this law, cities significantly reduced the number of accidents and injuries that could occur in these wet and crowded areas. Jumping from buildings in New York. New York, the city that never sleeps, a symbol of big dreams, boldness, and constantly reaching for new heights. But even in a city famous for freedom and daring feats, limits always existed. One of them was a law so seemingly obvious it's surprising, a regulation you might think wouldn't need to be stated. Jumping from buildings is illegal. Jumping from great heights is extremely risky, an act that can cause serious injury or immediate death. The reality is that this law needed to be clearly written in legal text and strictly enforced. The primary and most important reason is to prevent suicide. At the same time, it also aims to prevent reckless stunts, dangerous and life-threatening performances that could endanger innocent people on the streets or in neighboring buildings. Imagine someone wanting to perform a stunt to impress, to seek fleeting fame, or someone in a desperate state wanting to tragically end their life. The law must intervene not only to protect those individuals from themselves, but also to protect the surrounding community from unpredictable consequences. The goal is to save lives and maintain public order, ensuring the safety of all New York citizens. Authorities need to ensure public safety, and this regulation played a crucial role in that, serving as an invisible layer of protection between recklessness and disaster. Do you think this video needs improvement? Hit like and leave a comment. We are always striving to get better. Driving a black car on Sunday, you love the luxurious, powerful, and commanding look of your black car. To you, black is a symbol of sophistication, elegance that never goes out of style. You've planned a relaxing drive on a beautiful Sunday morning in the 70s, perhaps to visit friends, go to church, or simply enjoy the fresh air. But in some communities, that joy could be unexpectedly interrupted because at that time, driving a black car on Sunday was forbidden in some places. Black car owners must have been very annoyed, confused, or at least felt restricted by this regulation. They had to find ways to change their schedule, use other means of transportation on Sunday, or even walk to avoid violating the law and facing fines. You might wonder, why black and why Sunday? This is one of the strangest laws, and the reason behind it is deeply connected to the social and religious values of the era. Sunday was traditionally considered a sacred day of rest, a day of worship, and a time for peace and tranquility where people focused on family and spiritual activities. In this context, black cars might have been seen as disruptive, perhaps because they stood out more than other lighter, brighter colors many people preferred on holidays, or they were vaguely associated with activities that the community deemed inappropriate for the solemn, peaceful atmosphere of Sunday. Wearing hot pants in public parks. These pants, with their maximum shortness and body-hugging design, quickly became a symbol of freedom, liberation, and the rebellious style of youth. Women everywhere flaunted their slender legs, creating a new and challenging fashion wave against traditional norms. Of course, not every place welcomed this trend with open arms. You couldn't confidently wear your favorite hot pants for a stroll in the park on a sunny summer day. In some public parks, which were considered common spaces for everyone, wearing these super short shorts was illegal. If you wore such attire, you might be stared at, judged with disapproving glances, or even reminded by park staff to leave or change your clothing. This must have been a very awkward, embarrassing situation and could make fashion lovers feel offended or restricted. Hot shorts, with their obvious, revealing nature, were considered too explicit and inappropriate for a family-friendly environment like a park. Authorities wanted to ensure that public parks remained places where everyone, including children and families, could relax and play without discomfort from clothing deemed too revealing, offensive, or non-standard. Playing pinball under 18 years old. For young people in the 70s, pinball machines were an icon of modern entertainment, a world full of flashing lights, the clinking sound of colliding balls, and thrilling challenges demanding skill and a bit of luck. Arcades, or public entertainment centers with rows of vibrant pinball machines, were the dream destination for many teenagers after school or on weekends. However, in some areas, this joy was strictly limited. Minors under 18 were forbidden from playing pinball. This law didn't stem from pinball being a violent or physically harmful game, but from a deep community concern about morality and its influence on youth. Authorities and many parents at the time believed that pinball could encourage gambling behavior and other immoral activities. They saw in the pushes, the lucky scores, and the appeal of trying to win a similarity to gambling, and feared that this game could be a gateway leading young people down undesirable paths, setting a precedent for bad habits in the future. This law specifically targeted arcades, where pinball machines were a popular attraction. Parents and community leaders expressed deep worry about the impact of these games on teenagers. They wanted to protect minors from what they considered a gateway to gambling and other unwanted activities, a way to preserve the innocence and morality of the younger generation. Arcades had to comply with the rules, often requiring proof of age before allowing anyone to play pinball, sometimes even having staff on guard to check. Carrying an ice cream cone in your pocket? Why would such a harmless and seemingly silly act be forbidden by law? You just bought a cold, delicious ice cream cone on a hot summer day in the 70s. The ice cream slowly melts, its sweetness spreading, truly irresistible. But wait, before you think of finding a place to keep it, don't be foolish enough to put it in your pocket, because in some states in the 70s, carrying an ice cream cone in your pocket was illegal. Sounds unbelievable, doesn't it? A law that even the most creative minds would struggle to find a reason behind. It seems a bit exaggerated, but it was incredibly related to horses. Apparently, in the past, there had been cases, whether by pranksters or simply due to thoughtless inadvertence, where sweet ice cream cones were used to attract horses. A horse, with its keen sense of smell and love for sweets, could easily be drawn by the sweet scent of ice cream, Then follow the person carrying the ice cream cone. This could lead to a host of unwanted problems, disrupting public order on crowded streets, creating dangerous situations with vehicles and pedestrians, or even causing serious traffic accidents if the horse panicked among traffic. Authorities, with a strong desire to avoid chaos and ensure public safety, decided to enact this unbelievably specific law. They wanted to prevent scenarios that seemed peculiar but harbored potential dangers. Installing legless bathtubs. You're dreaming of a modern, luxurious bathroom with a sleek, recessed bathtub. No need for bulky legs to create a seamless and minimalist look. But if you lived in the 70s and were planning a bathroom renovation, you'd have to reconsider, because in some areas, installing a bathtub without legs was illegal. This sounds incredible and completely unrelated to anything we usually see today, doesn't it? But in the 70s, the reason behind this regulation was entirely practical and closely related to the hygiene standards as well as the building codes of that era. Imagine a legless bathtub placed directly on the floor without any space underneath. If there were any water leaks, even the smallest, or simply moisture accumulating under the bathtub from daily use, it would be very difficult to inspect, clean thoroughly, and especially could lead to the formation of mold and unpleasant dampness. Mold harms the health of family members with respiratory problems and seriously damages the floor structure, causing wood rot or material corrosion over time. Bathtub legs, seemingly just classic decorative details for the vintage style, actually played an important role in creating air circulation space underneath the heavy bathtub. This effectively helped prevent moisture accumulation, reducing the risk of mold and water damage to the floor. Do you remember anything you wanted to do as a young person that was unreasonably forbidden? Share your story in the comments below. Don't go anywhere. Things are about to get even stranger. Feeding pigeons. Strolling in a park or city square and seeing flocks of pigeons chirping and flying around is a familiar sight in many places worldwide. Many people, especially tourists and children, enjoy feeding them breadcrumbs or grains. This act seems harmless, even enjoyable. But if you did that in some American cities in the 70s, you could be in big trouble. Why could that be? Aren't they harmless animals? The reason behind this regulation was entirely practical and related to urban management. Cities at that time were facing an exploding pigeon population. Large numbers of pigeons had become a significant nuisance. They not only produced a large amount of droppings that caused unsanitary conditions, dirtying buildings, monuments, and streets, but were also believed to carry pathogens and harm the urban ecosystem. Authorities believed that by limiting their food source, they could more effectively control the number of pigeons, minimizing the problems they caused. The enforcement of this law included finding people caught feeding birds, especially in crowded urban areas. The goal was to improve the overall hygiene and aesthetics of public spaces, making them cleaner and more pleasant for everyone. This was a practical approach to managing urban wildlife, a testament to how cities had to cope with environmental and public health challenges in ways that today we might find a bit harsh. Spitting on the sidewalk, spitting in public, even today, is still considered a rude, uncivilized, and impolite act. It not only detracts from aesthetics, but also causes discomfort to those around. But in the 70s, in many cities across America, this behavior was not just rude, but illegal, driven by public health concerns, especially dangerous infectious diseases like pulmonary tuberculosis, which still persisted and were a serious problem. Authorities understood that indiscriminate spitting on sidewalks could become a source of dangerous disease transmission, spreading bacteria and viruses in the air and on public surfaces, a polluted environment that led to serious potential health risks for pedestrians, especially children who are more vulnerable. Spitting was considered unsanitary and disrespectful to others in the community. To combat this issue and protect public health, many cities enacted and strictly enforced laws prohibiting spitting on sidewalks. The goal was twofold. On one hand, to keep streets cleaner, creating a healthier living environment. On the other hand, and more importantly, to reduce the spread of dangerous diseases. By enforcing this law, they hoped to improve public hygiene and maintain higher health standards for the entire community. Flirting with flags. You might have heard about traditional flirting methods, from captivating glances, charming smiles, to sweet words, romantic love letters. But in the 70s, in some towns, there was a unique flirting method that was banned by law, using flags. You weren't allowed to use flags to send romantic signals to flirt with someone. It used to be illegal. Although using flags to communicate, especially semaphore flag signals, was usually more common among sailors and those working at sea to convey important messages, it seems to have become a way to send romantic signals, an unusual flirting method in some communities. Perhaps it was a youthful prank, a cultural curiosity, a unique experiment, an interesting creative endeavor, or simply a new form of expression that young people at the time tried to make an impression. But authorities were not very impressed with this form of communication. They were concerned that flirting with flags, especially public and somewhat ostentatious displays, could lead to excessive public displays, causing disorder and affecting public decorum, disrupting the general atmosphere. Imagine a young man trying to attract a girl's attention by waving a small flag with mysterious signals, encoded messages that only insiders would understand. This could attract unwanted attention from those around, interrupting the peaceful atmosphere of a park, a square, or another public area. Authorities wanted to keep public spaces orderly, respectful, and undisturbed by behaviors they considered inappropriate, detracting from urban aesthetics. Slurping soup in public. You're enjoying a peaceful lunch at a restaurant in New Jersey in the 70s. The atmosphere is elegant and everyone is dining formally. Suddenly, an unpleasant, rude, and prolonged sound echoes from the next table. Loud slurping, so noisy it makes you turn your head. Today, this behavior might only be considered rude or impolite, a minor social faux pas. But at that time, in some areas of New Jersey, slurping soup loudly would not be accepted. It sounds like a law only found in fairy tales, doesn't it? Older times placed great emphasis on proper dining etiquette and polite public behavior. Authorities wanted to encourage table manners, maintaining a civilized and formal dining environment. Although in some other cultures around the world, slurping soup or noodles loudly might be considered normal, even a sign of enjoyment or appreciation for the dish, in this context in New Jersey, it could lead to a serious legal issue. Imagine an elderly man having dinner at a casual eatery where he's used to slurping soup comfortably at home. He's simply eating according to his habit, but if he does that in public, he might be reminded by a server or even a police officer asked to stop. Dogs barking after 6 p.m. You've just returned home after a long, tiring day at work in the 70s. You look forward to a quiet, relaxing evening in your home, enjoying dinner with your family and a good night's sleep. But if your neighbor had a particularly noisy dog, you might have a bit of trouble, especially after the sun went down, because it was illegal for dogs to bark after 6 p.m. Sounds unbelievable, doesn't it? A law so detailed it even regulates dog barking times. This was one of the specific and quite strict noise control laws designed to maintain peace and quiet in residential areas. Dog barking could be particularly annoying at night, disturbing residents' sleep, causing stress, and disrupting their essential rest after a workday. Authorities in these communities prioritized the peace and tranquility of their citizens. They wanted to ensure that all residents could enjoy a more peaceful living environment, undisturbed by unnecessary noise, especially during evening rest hours. If this regulation was not complied with, owners could face fines or other penalties. Dog owners were responsible for keeping their pets quiet during these hours. Connecting to the internet without permission. Before the internet became an indispensable part of our daily lives, before massive social networks, smooth online videos, or booming e-commerce, in the 70s, the internet was still in its infancy. It was not the global network we know today, but a network primarily for government organizations, research universities, and large corporations serving military, scientific, and business purposes. And, surprisingly, connecting to this network without permission was an illegal act, a serious violation of the law. Although the internet was not yet widespread and not on the scale it is today, government agencies and large corporations owned private networks to exchange important and sensitive information. This information could be national secrets, advanced scientific research data, or confidential financial information. Unauthorized access to these networks was considered a significant security threat, an act that could have unpredictable consequences for national security and economic stability. A curious individual attempting to access a government computer or a business network posed the risk of information misuse, data theft, and serious security breaches. Unauthorized access could lead to severe penalties, including large fines or even imprisonment. Frowning at a police officer. You're having a bad day. Everything seems to be against you. Work isn't going well, your car broke down, or you simply feel tired and frustrated. You're walking down the street and accidentally encounter a police officer on duty. In a moment of unconscious frustration, you frown, showing your displeasure on your face. A small, unconscious act, a natural expression. But if you lived in some areas in the 70s, that act was illegal. Yes, frowning at a police officer could land you in trouble with the law, even result in a fine. It sounds ridiculous and somewhat arbitrary from today's perspective, but it really says a lot about the respect for authority and public order in that era. The police were seen as the supreme symbol of law and order, representing discipline and social stability. Showing disrespect to them, even with just a frown, a facial expression, could be considered an act of defiance, a sign of disobedience, or even undermining their authority in the public eye. The purpose of this law was to maintain public order and ensure that law enforcement agencies were treated with the respect necessary for their important role in society. Violators could face fines or other penalties depending on the severity of the act and the reaction of the violator. Drawing polka dots on the American flag. The American flag, with its red stripes, white stripes, and glittering stars on a deep blue field, has always been a sacred symbol of national pride, unity, and the country's core values. Therefore, laws are very strict in protecting the integrity and meaning of this flag. Any modification to the national flag is prohibited, including drawing polka dots on it. Any change or disrespectful display of the flag was considered illegal, an unacceptable act in the eyes of the law and the community. The flag is a sacred symbol, and adding any details not belonging to its original design was seen as a disrespectful act, undermining its symbolic meaning and historical value. If someone wanted to express their creativity by drawing polka dots on an old American flag or using a modified flag in a public event, regardless of their intention, it would be considered a violation of the law and could lead to serious consequences, even strong negative reactions from the community. Violators would face severe penalties, even being considered an act of desecrating a national symbol as perceived in society. Have you ever encountered any ironic situations related to similar strange rules? Comment below. Singing in a swimsuit, The poetic beach scene of the 70s, golden sunlight stretched across fine white sand, the gentle lapping of waves mingling with the laughter of children. You're relaxing, enjoying the fresh air, feeling the cool sea breeze caress your skin, and feeling full of joy and tranquility. Suddenly, a favorite melody, perhaps an upbeat disco tune or a romantic ballad, pops into your head, and you can't help but hum along, singing casually and innocently. But wait, if you were in some areas in the 70s, that seemingly harmless and spontaneous act could get you into serious trouble. Its purpose was to prevent behaviors that society at the time considered inappropriate or offensive. Singing while scantily clad, as in a swimsuit, was deemed indecent and could attract unwanted attention. In a society where standards of modesty, propriety, and public behavior were highly valued, expressing oneself too freely, too innocently, while minimally dressed, was seen as exceeding acceptable limits, potentially causing distraction or inconvenience to those around. The principle was enforced to preserve civility and decorum in public places, leaving a sofa on the porch. What's wrong with an old sofa on the porch? Isn't it an ideal place to relax, read a book, or chat with friends on a beautiful afternoon? Especially common and strictly enforced in college towns in the 70s, leaving upholstered furniture like sofas on porches was also illegal. This law was not about aesthetics or common clutter, an attempt to preserve neighborhood aesthetics. Instead, it stemmed from a very real and serious concern: fire hazard. Upholstered furniture, especially old sofas, often contained flammable materials like foam, fabric, and springs, making them highly susceptible to catching fire. When placed outdoors on a porch, they could become highly flammable material in case of a small fire due to carelessness, such as a discarded cigarette butt, a spark from a BBQ grill, or even intentional arson. This concern was particularly high in densely populated areas like student dormitories, where high housing density and the risk of fire spreading could cause catastrophic consequences, threatening the lives and property of hundreds of people. Imagine a group of college students enjoying an evening on the porch on an old sofa they brought outside to save space indoors. If there was a small accident, a cigarette butt fell and wasn't extinguished, or a small fire erupted from any source, the sofa could quickly ignite and spread throughout the entire building. We have taken a nostalgic trip through a decade full of contrasts, a decade where risk came with freedom. Memory is the bridge that helps the values and stories of our generation not be forgotten. Which detail shocked you the most or made you laugh the hardest? Share your memories and hit like on the video to help us continue telling amazing stories from the past. Thank you for accompanying us on this journey.